to Geared for Growth. I'm your host, Mike Mortlock from MCG Quantity Surveyors. Now today we are talking about the value a buyer's agent brings to a transaction when they have previous sales experience. Now we've covered this topic to some degree in the past about the negotiation skill set of a buyer's agent, but I'm today joined with Dean Pinter from Dean Pinter's Buyers Agency in Newcastle, and he talks to us about the skills that he brings to the table having had that sales experience and the experience of having a number of transactions in the markets that he operates. So it's a really interesting one for people that are looking to transact, and of course it's very difficult to do that without communicating with a sales agent, and Dean gives some insights into the way that they think and the way that you can hopefully try and avoid some of the pain that can happen when you're trying to put a deal together. Here's Dean. Dean Pinter, thanks for joining me on Geared for Growth.
Pleasure. Looking forward to having a chat today.
Well, I've been looking forward to this one for a while, and it's been in the pipes for quite some time now. Of course, you are a buyer's agent, and this show is no stranger to buyer's agents. So often we look for an interesting angle or a hook to draw people's interest. And one of the topics that you suggested to me is the advantages of engaging a buyer's agent that has a sales background. I thought that is an interesting one that we haven't really talked about before. We've talked about how important negotiation is, but from your perspective, you've played both sides of that negotiation team, for want of a better expression. So how best to start with the advantages of having that background?
Yeah, look, I think, off the top of my head, there's an old saying or a quote, I guess, that says, if a person lives long enough, you get to see just about everything. So I think that relates to, now that I've reached the magic half century in life, and half of my life has been devoted to property in one shape or form or another, on all sides of the fence. So I think it brings that sort of combination of, seeing from a vendor's side, meaning the owner of the property and the many facets that brings and the reason why they're selling. And then as a buyer's agent, I think having seen many scenarios play out, and I think that just brings so much to the table where I don't have to rely so much on any type of third party coming in. There's third parties we use and, pest and build reports and surveys and all that sort of stuff, what's required. But when it comes to making on the spot decisions, I think I can save, people a lot of time because I've probably seen the scenario play out hundreds of times before. And look, there's certainly some deals that go swimmingly well and everything's fine. And, we're seeing a lot of new entrants in the industry. Yeah. And on some occasions, it's just simply agreeing on a price and the rest falls into place. You have your legal teams agreeing on times and settlement periods and things like that. But where the experience really comes in, I find, is that where things aren't quite that simple, and there may be small nuances to put that deal together, and that could be anything from not only the situation involved in trying to bring the two parties together, but it's also goes back to the reasons and understanding little nuances that just may help me as a buyer's agent understand what's really happening behind the scenes, and working on both sides of the fence is definitely given me that advantage where I'm compassionate towards both sides, I guess, because there's a lot of people, there's lots of reasons why people sell. Death, divorce, and all the things in between, upsizing and downsizing and so forth. So I do believe, having transacted, last time I counted, it was 444 or something, but, that's neither here nor there. But what it does tell people listening, I guess, is that there's probably no scenario I haven't faced. We live and learn, of course, every day's, we never stop learning. However, when it comes to putting deals together, I think the experience comes into play where things aren't quite simple. and there's some nuances and some balancing to be done to get a deal across the line. And that particularly works in markets where it's a very competitive market, obviously, as well. So each market changes. And I guess a point being made that comes to mind is, in my experience, I've seen a lot of ups and downs in the industry, a lot of fluctuations. We've seen a lot of new entrants in the industry come after COVID. There's people out there, providing buyer agent courses and things like that, where back in my time, you sort of had to go through the right channels. There wasn't third party opportunities to get your license. So I think in that regard, that experience does sort of play out every day for me, and helps people, I guess, have that comfort in knowing that there's very little that I haven't faced before.
Yes. Well, I think that that ties into the Real Estate Buyers Agents Association catchphrase or tagline, ask for experience, right? And I know you're a REBA member, and I've been an affiliate for quite some time, because there's professional standards that I think are under threat when entrants come into the industry and don't necessarily have the experience. But I do want to zero in on some of the things that you would have picked up from working on the other side of the fence, in, say, the vendor's side of things. I'm guessing that there's certain listings that they get and they know there's an impediment to the sale. It's the block's too small, the property's feng shui is all off, the owner wants too much, or they want an extended settlement, or the pool's leaking. A million different things that can be an impediment, and the agent has to come up with a game plan to try and circumvent that or minimize that. And I guess with their experience, having done it a few times, they'll come upon a tactic or a way to explain away the problem that they know is working for them. And you would have been in that situation yourself. Is it interesting when you hear agents saying things to you about a property and you sort of think straight away, I know exactly what you're trying to hide from me?
Yeah, look, exactly. And it's almost like, when I'm, particularly for new agents in the industry, that have only been there for a few years, it's interesting, some of the answers I already know before I ask the question, where it's heading. So I guess, because once you hear it once, it sort of goes into the memory banks. But I will say there's a couple parts to the question. And I guess the first part being, for the listeners today, sometimes the agent doesn't have all the answers. And this is sort of, being an agent, I have that compassion towards it, because a lot of people get a call and come into my home and have a look. I'm thinking of selling, and it progresses from that to signing an agreement, and on the market you go. You like what you hear as a vendor. Now, sometimes the agent doesn't get to hear the real story as well. It's like anything when you sell things, Mike. It's, if you were selling a motor vehicle, you don't necessarily, when someone walks down the driveway, you don't necessarily open with, oh, by the way, it's got a bad leak in the gasket cover. It's, there's a windy diff noise, and, those conversations don't really happen straight away. You go straight to the positives, and an agent's there to definitely talk about positives. And a good agent on most occasion, will answer truthfully. And if they don't have the answer, they'll seek the answer and say, thank you very much. I don't know the answer to that, but I'll get back to you. Because a lot of the times the agent doesn't know exactly what they're doing. They may have spent 30 minutes in a home where the vendor spent 30 years in a home. So they can't possibly cover 30 years of ownership in a half an hour situation where the agent's main motivation is getting a signature on an agreement to put it on the market, and that's how, an agent gets paid. They don't get paid any other way. And that's like me, I don't get paid unless I succeed in a very successful purchase of a property. So I think some of the questions I ask is probably going to be a lot more deeper and involved than a general buyer would ask. Because a lot of due diligence is done way before I get to a property. So, it's like the old John West saying, we reject 80 or 90% before we even put an effort in. And that's, as a buyer's agent or a good buyer's agent, You know, it helps me immensely to, when I have a client that wants to be involved and maybe sending me an opportunity or an address, I can almost, with 20 or 30 years experience, I can almost say that's not going to work for you because of.
Right.
And it could be mine subsidence, flooding zones, or just, there's a good chance I've probably bought or sold a home within 100 meters of the home we're talking about.
Right.
You know, when you've had so many transactions over so many years and being involved in so many options. So, you know, the scenario went, Dean, I'm looking at a home. It was an inner city suburb called Maryville. And without going into specifics, I had 9 transactions in that street. And right. I'm not saying that to oppress you or anything, but it's just, I know that a particular end of the street floods when we've had some rain on a full moon. The other end of the street is quite good, although it still comes under the same flood zoning. So in that situation, I can say, you know, if it was, you know, yourself, Mike, I could say, Mike, I don't really buy property at that end of that street because of these reasons. And, you know, they go, oh, okay, but it's under the same flood zoning. Yes, but there's a reality to that as well. That end definitely does flood in certain situations. That end has never flooded, although it's under the same flood zoning. So that's just one example that I can save a lot of time for people by just knowing the address. Not exactly knowing the house, of course, but or I may have purchased or sold one, you know, in the adjacent street. And it comes back to, I touched on earlier, Mike, about, you know, not needing so much a third party straight away. I see what's happening in the industry at the moment with less experienced buyers agents is that, you know, they might come from an accounting background, engineering background, whatever it may be. There's a school teacher that just started up, and that's all fine. And they love property, and that's fantastic. But I really think people need to be very careful when they're interviewing or considering engaging a buyer's agent, that experience would have to be on the top of the list, you would think. Just to have their best interests at heart and the experience of knowing the area. I personally don't go too far out of Newcastle specifically. Yep. I do acreage and lifestyle purchases up in the Hunter Valley, Nelson Bay and in Byron Bay, but I'm very au fait on those areas. I've been holidaying there for over 20 years. So once again, I know the areas off the top of my head. So I think that experience, in a long answer to your question, is just knowing straight away and not having to spend hours on third parties and ringing people and, you know, getting the answers and knowing that there's electricity easements nearby in that particular suburb. There's social housing that people might not know about. We know there's large social housing groups in some suburbs in Newcastle, but over the years they're placing them within suburbs. So, you know, little things like that. And not all social housing's bad. Some you wouldn't want to perhaps reside near, and some is not a problem. So it's just that experience where I can get to the bottom line so much quicker. Some of my competitors would take a week or two or to get to the same answers that I know that's already up here just through doing it for over 24 years. And again, touching on the ebbs and flows of the property market, Mike, you know, seeing what areas have worked really well through tough times and what areas haven't done so well, and all of the above. So when somebody comes to me with a specific address, because I do have services that I do everything, and then there's other services where people have already zeroed in on a property and they just want that experience to say, hey, am I doing the right thing? Yeah. And is this price a reasonable price? I don't want to overpay. So long answer to a good question.
No, well, it's a good answer to a question that perhaps dedicated or demanded a longer answer. But you've pled the case very well for the value of experience and also a local buyer's agent, because, you know, many investors are looking at the whole of Australia to transact in. And of course, you might work with people that aren't from Newcastle and don't have an exposure to the Newcastle market. And it's been a perennial performer at a price point that's lower than other sort of blue chip areas around the country. But for people that are listening and they've drunk the Kool-Aid, they're like, yep, I think I can definitely see where the advantage of having that sales background comes from. What advice would you have for investors that are trying to go it on their own and communicating with a sales agent that, to be fair, the power is tipped very strongly in favor of the sales agent because it's their trade craft. It's their bread and butter. They do that all day, every day. And a property investor, if they're lucky, might buy a couple of properties and there could be a couple of years gap between them. Even if they have a big portfolio, they're just not doing it every single day. So how would you try and help someone to say, look, this is the sort of stuff that you should avoid, or here's information you shouldn't give away, or here's a strategy that's going to protect your position? What can you give us there? The Geared for Growth Property Investing podcast is presented by our business, MCG Quantity Surveyors. If you're an investor or a property professional looking to get the best tax depreciation deductions for yourself or your clients, please get in touch with us at mcgqs.com.au. It's our mission to help as many property investors as we can to maximise their claims and maximise their property education as well.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and there's so many strategies, and I know we'll touch on auction space probably in another episode, but taking some strategies out of the auction space. And as an agent, briefly, if I could talk about, I used to love auction for many reasons because of its transparency in first place. And that is because and particularly on site where you're all in the same space and simply everyone can see what's going on.
Yeah.
The difficulty and the complaints I get back from people, I have two major complaints for people out in the area for investors, and that is price guides and the lack of, the attractiveness of a price guide, let's say. And look, speaking on as an agent, I definitely understand why an agent may put a price guide down a little bit lower than realistic or lower than even expectations. And that is for many reasons. Primarily, it's to get more people through the door. As an agent, the more people you meet, the more prospects you've got to possibly list their home in the future and add to your data bank and all of those things.
Yeah. Add
to your VIP list and just generally know your area, know the neighbours come. You want to meet as many neighbours as you can, all that sort of stuff. So that's understandable. It is a relationship business, real estate, particularly on the sales side. And the other thing is, for me, and that knowing the agents, how they operate as well, is how I strategize moving forward in most of my negotiations as well. Having dealt with a lot of these agents and known them for the best part of 10, 15 years, and there's 300 agents, give or take, in Newcastle at any one time. Wow. I'm not professing to know 300 people personally, but you certainly, in my area, I deal with predominantly sort of 30 to 40 agents, and I know how they operate individually, how they like to put deals together. So that's a massive advantage. Some are very wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, let's go. I've reached the number, let's move on. Others are definitely out there to extract every cent they can and everything in between. So it's a really big advantage once I know when somebody comes to me, I know how that particular agent operates, or particularly the company even, how they operate and the way they do their sales. As you know, there's expression of interest. There is guides. By law, you don't have to really give a guide on an auction. A lot of people do give a guide, and the guide could be quite large. Normally, people just automatically are attracted to the higher end of the guide. If it's a $750 to $850 guide, a lot of people say, well, I need to spend $850, and I think the last time that I had a look, 31% went quite substantially over the guide, right? And but we're coming down now. I think 8% sold within the guide. Everything was over, and not many under. So it's a common complaint I get that, Dean, I've found the home, it's within my price range, and the first question I say, well, let's go a little bit deeper than that. Let's talk about where is your price range, where you're comfortable, your pre-approvals and all that sort of stuff, because we don't want to waste time on something where I know, there's a particular agent who's known for quite low underquoting, and it's just saving that buyer a lot of time. Because I do get, I'll give you one example. Now, I was lining up for an open home. There was at least 40 people lined up the other day. It was only 2 Saturdays ago. The price guide was very, very attractive in a very, very good suburb. Almost 200,000 below land value. And this had an old, worn out home. So straight away, but 40 or 50 people, majority first home buyers / investors, a couple knockdown rebuilders there. And the people behind me were I could hear them talking, and they saw the shirt and they said, "Hey, what do you think? Where's this place going to go?" And I said, "Well, it's certainly not going to sell within the guide of 750 to 850. Yep. It's definitely going to have a 9 in it." And they went, "We've just driven up from Sydney to this home, And I said, "Look, still go through it, have a look, but it's, lo and behold, it sold for 940,000 within 7 days, which is without working percentages. And look, without sort of pointing fingers at anyone, it is what it is. But coming back to the experience factor, and they actually walked away. They actually said, "Dean, is that right? Why sit in line on a hot Saturday morning if that's the case?" And I said, "Look, I don't know. I can't verbatim say that's where it is, but in my experience, it's going to have a 9 in it." Yep. And so lo and behold, it did. So I saved those guys an hour of their day.
Apart from the 2-hour drive.
I do save. The thing with me and other quality buyers agents that have been around for a while, and there's probably a handful in Newcastle. Apparently someone said there's 42 of us now.
Wow.
I started and there was 4 or 5, and that was only, I transitioned in 2018, and there was 5 true buyers agents. Now somebody said there's 42, and out of those 42, 31 have joined after COVID.
Right.
So it's a bit of a concern with any new industry. You're going to have people see, maybe I can make some money, and, I love property, I can help some people. And from the outside, like any industry, like your own, it probably seems like I could do that. And there's no university course for this. There's no, it's a 2-week TAFE course, if you really, and there's a process to get your license. Don't get me wrong. I'm a licensed one, and I can, but to get into the industry, a little bit of experience, you go and do these separate courses, and away you go. So I'd be very concerned handing over now what starts at $1 million really in Newcastle, right?
Yeah.
I'd be very concerned handing over $1 million to somebody who's been in the industry for 12 months and is going to do the right thing. And, so it's concerning times to a degree, but I would implore people to stick to experience. And by all means, shop around. But if someone says they've been in the industry for a year or two, I would think that'd be quite a red flag to myself or any investor.
Yeah, I think that's a fair call. So you've touched on the price guides, and I think we've had episodes in the past where we've basically sort of said, look, that they are part of the marketing, whether we like it or not, and however states are trying to legislate against underquoting, agents will use them to dangle a carrot, to broaden the potential buyer base, to create artificial competition. So anyone listening would probably be worthwhile completely ignoring the buyer's guide and trying to do their own comparative market analysis. Of course, it's very easy when they're working with someone like yourself. But let's say they are zeroing in on this investment property and they're starting to have the initial conversations with the agent. What, from a sales point of view, would you be really trying to probe and information that you would get from them that you wouldn't give as a buyer?
I think it's hard to. You need to show an agent your motivation. You need to show them you're serious, obviously, to get on the short list, so to speak.
Yep.
A lot of people breeze in and out of opens. Give some small details, sometimes not even the right detail. There's no ID checks at opens and all that sort of stuff, which is crazy in itself. It is what it is, but when you're opening up your home to the public. But, it's just a name, and some agents still don't even bother with that, honestly. Like, some people just say, give me a yell if you're interested. Other agencies have 3 or 4 agents there, in every room. So it's a little bit all over the place in that respect, the industry. There's no standard. But I would be suggesting that you show your interest in the property, but you don't want to sound overly confident as well, meaning that, you don't. There's so many strategies to use. Me personally, it's different from my point of view because like I touched on before, I know I'm going to know the agent and how they work and what they require to take me serious. As a standard buyer out there to give some value today, you definitely want to make your intentions quite clear and say, this is on my short list and where are you up to with the sale? Meaning that, and things like knowing timeframes, how long has it been on the open, how many opens, the average attendance at opens, all that sort of stuff comes into play. How many offers have been made, how many pre-offers have been made, have they been seriously considered? Some agents will give you that straight off the bat. They will say, look, we're getting close to getting under offer. This may be the last open home, all that sort of stuff, can bring out offers into people. And the thing about transparency in real estate, if it's not an auction, how do you know? How do you know an offer's been made?
Yeah.
How do you know the offer's been made at that level? How do you know that offer's been made with no contingencies? And when I say contingencies, and that is, guys, who people may have heard that on some of the real estate shows, it's how we put a deal together. It's the time frame, because sometimes it's not just about money. Is obviously sits on the top. Everyone wants the most they can get. It's the agent's job to get them the most money. It's my job to get the lowest price. But sometimes it comes back, Mike, to the best conditions that suit both parties. Some people selling may not have a home to go to, so they're looking at a longer settlement. So we might be able to massage a deal in that respect by giving them that time, but also they might help us in some other areas, meaning a slight price reduction. It could be furniture included. It could be anything of the above. There's, it could be a list that long of contingencies that come with a deal. It could be something in the contract that doesn't suit. And that's another big area that we could probably talk about for 20 minutes on itself, is when you get to a property and you go, okay, yep, beautiful, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths and parking. It's fantastic. It ticks my boxes. There's a contract on the bench. How many people look at that contract? I know I do. It's one of the things I go to first, because there's 3 parts of that contract I look for, which will enable me to walk straight back out the home, or it'll enable me to continue the inspection. And we can talk about those things later.
Yeah, I'd love to hear what they are.
Oh, fine. So I look at the front page. So I need to know settlement periods, ownership, if it's in a company name versus many owners, because I know if it's got 5 or 6 surnames there, I know that there's 5 or 6 people that need to come to the party to get to agree, as opposed to one individual. If it's a company name, there could be various taxes associated. I need to know also the inclusions are on the front page, what's included, and that could be particularly for lifestyle or acreage properties or larger blocks. The other big important thing is I go to the last page of the contract. And for those people who want to know that, that's what we call the waterboard diagram. So that shows the sewer. So if you're looking at putting a pool in, or you're demolishing the garage to extend, all these things come into play, which if there's a sewer running through your backyard at the back side or in between, that can almost put a stop to any of that. Yes. I mean, money solves a lot of things in property, but with sewer, it's a very difficult and expensive. So that's a big thing a lot of people don't even look at. Yeah. So once again, the experience comes where I can look at that contract. It ticks enough boxes for me to then continue the inspection, which normally I start on the outside of a home, and I look at things like the foundations to begin with, because they're the big ticket items. Yeah. Roofing, foundations, drainage issues, parking, width of driveway, all of that stuff. And that comes back to my client's brief, of course, because they might be car people and want to ease of access, or people might be from Sydney who have never used a garage and they're still happy to park on the street. All these things come into play. But there is many nuances I look for other than the contract, and that is, with getting back to your original question, is how the agent is handling the sale as well. Yeah. The other thing is, I guess, and I'll be careful what I say here, being a well-known buyer's agent, where all the agents know me, I know them, I get to the bottom line quite quickly. Right. So they're probably going to tell me a little bit more than they would tell the average buyer. Right. Meaning, Dean, if you've got someone interested, you need to rock and roll. We're just about to wrap this up. by Wednesday afternoon, there'll be a sold sticker. If you want to have a crack, let's rock and roll. So I need to double speed on all my due diligence in that position. Yeah. Other times, I've got a big short list where I know a property's been on the market for X amount, and I know all that anyway because, Mike, we've all got the ability to download RP data or take a subscription. And we can all basically, even some of the buyers agents that have been in we all have the same subscriptions. Yep. We can all sit on the desktop and type away and see when it sold last and how many days it was on the market and all of those things. What the desktop doesn't tell you is some of the stuff that is built in here after 20 years, whatever it is, 25 years, that I know why I won't go into that area straight away, or the mine subsidence is on the higher end of the scale for me. So that means for people out there, knockdown rebuild could not be an option. Even, it's just not an option. So straight away we move on from that property. And there is certain portals we use as well. And now with the technology of Google Earth and 6 maps and the list goes on, you can really delve in quite deeply in the desktop before an inspection. But it's a combination of both for me. I'm still going on memory, plus all the modern applications you can use, and council and water boards and all the rest of it, mine subsidence board, and then comes the physical inspection as well. So, by the time I get to a home, it's already on the short list for me. It's already ticked enough boxes to warrant an inspection. I'm not out there just looking at properties because I love property, so to speak. Yeah. So
well, Dean, I suppose if the debate was, is there value in hiring a local, experienced ex-sales agent, buyer's agent, then we're probably going to call you speaker 1, 2, and 3 for the affirmative. So, thank you for your pleading your case on that one. I think there's a tremendous amount of stuff that the average investor that's transacting very infrequently doesn't really understand. So, thank you very much for illuminating that with so much detail today.
Oh, thanks for the opportunity, and who's ever listening, hope you grabbed something, a little pearl of wisdom out of there. That would make my day.
And I'm sure they will, and we'll get you back for some auction strategies soon as well.
Thanks so much, Mike. I appreciate it. Great catching up.
Yeah, likewise. Cheers, Dean.
Cheers, Mike.